We're getting new details now in a disturbing murder case out of California. A 10-year-old boy, 10 years old, think of this, accused of shooting and killing his white supremacist father. The boy now undergoing psychiatric evaluation. His defense team looking into a possible insanity defense. Well, the boy's case described as rare, very unusual because of his age. David Wohl is a defense attorney. He joins us. David, you're the guy who told me about this case. Tad Nelson joins us as well, former prosecutor and defense attorney. David, let me start with you. Because of his age, the boy cannot be tried as an adult, and you kindly pointed my attention to Penal Code Section 26, which we're going to put up on the screen right now. Under this code, what do prosecutors have to prove, David?
Well, Greg, along with proving the facts of the case, they've got to prove that at the time of the offense, that the boy actually knew what he was doing was wrong. And, you know, that sometimes is an uphill battle for these people. And you have to take into consideration the environment that this young boy grew up in. He grew up with a neo-Nazi father that was very active in the neo-Nazi party. He grew up in a very dysfunctional home, a violent home where Child Protective Services regularly visited on emergency response calls. That type of environment can sort of breed a feeling in a child that violence is simply okay and there's nothing wrong with it. So that when he pulled the trigger, he didn't appreciate right from wrong, and so that's very similar to an insanity defense where you have to prove basically he didn't understand general right from wrong.
Right.
So my guess is, even though this is charged as a murder, it may end up being something more like a manslaughter, Greg.
Tad, the father was the head of this white supremacist group. They are very prominent, unfortunately. Carried a swastika flag. You know, he led these neo-Nazi rallies outside a synagogue and a day labor site. I mean, just awful stuff. How much of that, however, will be relevant and admissible, if at all?
Well, it's all going to be relevant. The admissibility is always going to be a question. The bottom line here, Greg, is that when you get right down to brass tacks, there was the intentional taking of another life. That's a murder. That's why we're here. We're going to have to look at the stuff, just like Joe said. We've got the house of hate problems. We got Dad's a scumbag. Dad's leading the way against the white supremacy. Yeah, there's lots of issues for this kid. But at the end of the day, he's still going to have to take responsibility. And responsibility doesn't necessarily mean that he goes to jail for the rest of his life.
Right.
There's going to be a situation in that state where they're going to have something they can do for him. It may be some kind of community situation where they put him on a probation or give him other services. But the kid clearly needs help, and I don't know that the insanity defense is necessarily going to be the thing that gets him out of this.
You know, David, the defense here, and defense attorneys do this all the time. I used to be a defense attorney, and you know, you can't do this overtly, but you do try to send the message to the jury in a case like this that the victim needed killing. You know, you try to villainize the victim so that in some small way it helps your defendant, and in this particular case, could help in a big way because the kid's 10.
Well, remember one thing, though, Greg. There's not going to be a jury. It's going to be a judge hearing this. In juvenile court, there are no juries. But, yes, you know, I spent nearly 20 years working in that very court where this boy is charged, Riverside County Juvenile Court, and I had a handful of 9 or 10-year-olds, and you got to understand how rare this is. I mean, they were charged with a simple assault or vandalism cases, but to have a 10-year-old actually charged with murder, a premeditated murder, is so exceedingly rare that I think the judges are going to take into account everything in his background that created the state where he'd actually want to pull out a gun, and apparently it seems to me maybe in the father's sleep just blew him away. It's such a tragedy all the way around. Yeah, the dad was a neo-Nazi, a total dirtbag, but to raise a child that could do this to you is just extraordinarily tragic.
Yeah. All right, so Tad, the defense is talking about insanity, which is a mental disease or defect so severe you don't know right from wrong. In this particular case, to support that, would you try to introduce evidence, and apparently there is some, that this kid was abused chronically by his father and neglected?
Without a doubt. You're going to take all the stuff about the abuse and neglect from the family, but just as important as that, this kid has a history of violent activity, a history of aggressive behavior, thrown out of several schools. This kid has always been a problem child. And that's where it's going to get down to, does he know right or wrong when he is, the reason he did this, or what they're saying, is that he didn't like the way Dad was running the house. He knows what to do. I mean, in watching Dad has taught him from the get-go. When you have a problem, you go out there, you make it happen. That's what this kid did that night. He had a problem, he took care of it.
Sad case. Tad Nelson, David Wohl, good to see you both. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, the world getting a stunning new look at Osama bin Laden today. What the images